what happens when BlackRock needs to settle with Fidelity and they're transferring a couple billion dollars worth of Bitcoin? It changes everything. Bitcoin is the most important thing that we could possibly have ever created as a species. Bitcoin changes that because it is a rule that you can't violate. If you want to capture that resource, you can't force someone to take that resource from them. I don't think people can really comprehend like how great the world can be. If Bitcoin fails, I'm probably going to become Amish. Like, I'm just going to go make my own butter and raise sheep and ride around on a horse.
Why don't you think more people don't see the problem? Today, I'm excited to welcome Daniel White to the podcast. Daniel is the best-selling author of The Great Realignment, founder of Microseed, and a Bitcoiner. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Paula. It's great to be here. I'm thrilled to be here, actually. What a great pod.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to chatting with you, and I love your background. That's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to Bitcoin.
Goodness, what a story that can be. I actually grew up in a libertarian household. Like I was my dad had a picture of Ayn Rand on the wall. I mean, he was that guy, right? So I had a lot of early exposure to concepts around like sound money and limited government and things like that. And as I kind of grew a little bit older, like by the time I was in high school, and this is in the 1980s, I was talking to people about we need to get back to the gold standard and things like that, and I sounded like an absolute lunatic at the time. Like this was the era of like Reagan and, trickle down economics. And that was when I sort of postulate the US kind of went to the printing standard rather than the, saving standard. But all through those kind of early formative years, I think because of that experience and being so kind of early to sound money ideas, when Bitcoin came around in like 2009, 2010, I was actually getting into it at that time. Like I became aware of Bitcoin in 2010. At the time I was sort of trying to mine it and I could never quite figure that out. And I had an old like gaming laptop at the time that I don't think was kind of up to the task to begin with. Plus just my lack of technical expertise, but I never quite got my head wrapped around it. So I can't. I mean, it's been so long since this all happened, but at some point I found a guy. I think it was on a forum somewhere that agreed to send me some Bitcoin in exchange for a money order. Like that's how sort of backwards this was, and this was before seed phrases and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, after a little bit of back and forth, I ended up getting, I don't know if it was like 5 Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin. I honestly can't remember how many it was, but it was right shortly after. I remember the price declined dramatically. Like I was going, oh my God, I just sent this guy $100 and I only have like 40. Like, and so it sort of registered in my brain, like, oh, this is just a scam, right? And I had voices like Peter Schiff and stuff like that, and the gold bug mentality of like, well, God's money is gold and gold is real money. And this is like cute concept, but so I kind of deleted everything. I sort of forgot about where it all is. I mean, it's just gone basically. But in 2014, I wrote a big 4-part series for the Banking Law Journal, and I actually wrote a little bit about Bitcoin there. And there was a gal that did a lot of the research that became the basis for chain analysis. So I was talking about Bitcoin even in 2014 and like in a public forum, and it was part of an anti-money laundering paper or series I did for the Banking Law Journal. But I was talking about sort of some of the shortcomings, and people at the time still thought it was like anonymous and it couldn't be traced and all this kind of stuff. I can't remember the gal's name from University of California, San Diego, but she sort of went, "Hey, I actually think you can trace this stuff." And again, that became the basis for chain analysis and things. So I've been around Bitcoin for a long time, but unfortunately, the sound money thing also sort of led me away from Bitcoin for a long time because I kept thinking of it sort of in the same terms like Peter Schiff does to this day. It's a Ponzi, it's a thing, it's a rug pull, it's a, and so it wasn't until probably 2021 ish, like I was sort of shitcoining, pardon my French, like kind of in 2020 ish, 2019, 2020. But I sort of viewed Bitcoin as the same sort of thing, right? I viewed them all like many, like even Ross Ulbricht when he came out. I can see why people get confused about like it just seems like another crypto, and it wasn't until 2021 that I finally came to that realization. And there was a couple of factors that sort of influenced me towards like, oh, Bitcoin is the only thing worth paying attention to. Everything else is sort of a waste of time. And that was the Robert Breedlove and Michael Saylor series. I actually just sat down and watched the whole thing, like tip to tail, like I binge watched it. And that was sort of a planted a much firmer seed. And then a book, I call it a book. I think it's loosely a book. Like it was the kid's thesis. It was Jason Lowery's software that, and a lot of people sort of crap on that kid's head to this day about like his theories being whatever. And I wouldn't say that I agree with every single statement he made in the thing, but I'd also point out it's a master's thesis. The guy was like 22 or 23 years old when he wrote it. So it's like you can forgive him a little bit of like hyperbole or, sort of overreach maybe. But there were some concepts in there that had a pretty profound impact on my sort of trajectory in terms of understanding Bitcoin and where it fits in the world. And then when you couple that all with my legal research background and the sort of historical analysis I've done in like securities law and bankruptcy law and things like that, and my sort of libertarian upbringings, that sort of led me to this full tilt. Like Bitcoin is the only thing. Bitcoin is the most important thing that we could possibly have ever created as a species. And it also led to the book and things like that. So it's kind of my long-winded backstory, but it was a long, long, long journey to get to where I am today, which is full on Bitcoin maxi, as about as maxi as you can get, I think.
Yeah, that is an interesting journey because I've heard you say that the most important invention of our time is
Mm.
Bitcoin, and you pretty much got it during that time of study and watching the pre-love series with Sailor. Was there a moment when you just said, "This is it"?
Well, it was that sort of subtle combination of things. Like, it's you kind of get little inputs here and there. And like I had a friend in 2020 that was running around telling everybody, like, hey, you need to go buy Bitcoin. Everybody should buy Bitcoin. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But he was also buying like Solana and all this other stuff. Like he ended up making a mint just off of shitcoining. But he was also a very staunch Bitcoiner. He said, this thing's going to $1 million. And I would sort of poke fun at him, like, oh yeah, $1 million and this and that. And so even though I had those inputs from someone that I trusted at the time, I still didn't quite get it, but it was planting seeds the whole way, right? And by the time I got to the Sailor Breedlove series and started, on Safadin's book and, like I kind of dicker with some of his points as well. But when you start getting into these things, they're just more touch points, I think, that you can start kind of wrapping your head around like, oh, what does this really mean? And and when you start unpacking like what money is and like the whole series that Breedlove and Sailor did and where does money come from and things like that. And then when you couple it with some of the egalitarian access points that Lowry made, I started to see it in a very different light. And it took all of those that combination of all those touch points from my friend early on, the shitcoiner slash Bitcoiner, and on all the little touch points on the way to finally overcome like some of the more nonsensical arguments that I held as true for a long time, to overcome my own ego and my own like sort of idea that like, hey, I understand the world of economics and finance better than most. So therefore, my opinion on Bitcoin is more valid than someone who has spent more time thinking about it and looking into it and researching it. So I had to overcome a lot of objections, both personal and external. And I think it was that combination of all those little touch points on the way that it finally broke through, and I finally found myself in a place where I could set my ego aside and just go, wait a minute, with an open mind, just look at what this is and try and understand it better. And I'm grateful to God for that opportunity and that ability to kind of go, oh, thank you for letting me set aside my biases and my preconceptions, and just approach this with an open mind. And that sort of like it blossomed all at once, sort of that gradually then suddenly kind of thing. But it was my understanding rather than like a price action or a bankruptcy, I guess, right?
So Bitcoin really does humble us.
Yeah, it has to. Or I mean, I think if you come to it with a degree of humility to begin with, it becomes a lot easier. I think the trouble a lot of us have modernly is that there's so many opportunities to not be humble in the face of greatness and awe and wonderment. And I think those things are helpful to survive like in a fiat world. Like, I think they're maladaptive survival strategies ultimately, and they're things that kind of provide some solace and comfort as you are confronted with the ever-present reality that you're kind of grinding in a factory farm, right? And it makes it so that's tolerable. Those feelings of certitude and those platitudes from like Warren Buffett and like these great investors and all this kind of stuff. It makes it, I think, tolerable to exist in a fiat world where your time and energy and effort is continually being drained from you, relentlessly and very systematically. And it's to overcome that sort of survival mechanism, I think, is very difficult for a lot of people because the alternative to it is very discomforting, right? You look at the world and you kind of go, "Oh my god." It's like Neo waking up in the Matrix. You go, "Oh, all of this is nonsense. Oh my god." And not only is it nonsense, it's horrible. It's like horrifying what they're doing to us. And to exist in that world is to be Neo, is to be the guy who has to learn how to walk again and learn how to do everything, right? In a very new reality. I don't fault people for not getting it. I don't fault people for rejecting it because the amount of comfort that comes from not understanding and embracing and taking upon themselves like what this actually means. I can fully understand why people would take comfort in that.
Why don't you think more people don't see the problem?
Well, I think a lot of it kind of ties into that sort of maladaptive survival strategy, right? There's like a fictional roadmap for people to follow, right? Like you work hard and you save money and like the American dream and all that kind of stuff. These are all sort of I hate to call them fictions, but they are fictions. They really are, and especially modernly. And it ends up becoming like a survivorship bias thing, right? Like where the people that do those things that end up where it works out for them, they go, "See, that whole thing works." And it leaves out all the people that tried to do the exact same thing and did not have that success and did not have that outcome. And, whether like their loved one gets cancer or someone gets sick or there's an injury or they lose a job or there are like any number of ways to disrupt the American dream path that is laid out for people as if it's a sure thing. Like just work hard, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, that sort of boomer trope kind of thing. And I think, when you're fed that continually and when you're fed this idea of like everything is going to work out and it's your fault if it doesn't, then it becomes very, very difficult to look at the alternatives, right? Because those alternatives mean a lot of things. Like it means A, you're not necessarily in control of your destiny. So it means giving up control or at least the illusion of control. It means that, hey, maybe it wasn't really your fault, which subjects you to blame and criticism from others who say, well, you're just not working hard enough or you're just lazy or, and so when you have the herd kind of all funneled down that one path and everyone's headed for the cliff and no one wants to be the person who's standing there by themselves. And this ties into just our natural systems, like the way we operate as human beings. Like you don't want to stand out, because that subjects you to danger, in extreme circumstances back at the survival threshold when people were living in little tribes. If you're the one that ran out in front of everybody and said, I don't think that lion's so dangerous, that puts you at extreme danger, right? So you never want to be an outlier. You want to kind of, and it's part of that social cohesion and the group cohesion is like we all kind of want to do the same things. So to be the person that stands out from that, I think puts you in a very, very uncomfortable position. And for a lot of people, I think it's just a bridge too far. When it comes time to like trying to orange pill somebody or something like that, like I have I think Sailor's words in my heart, and I have Jeff Booth's words in my heart. Like we need to come to people with understanding and compassion because not all of us are renegade rebels that stand in front of the hail of arrows and infantry charging down on you and just go, I am standing firm no matter what. Because it's hard for a lot of people to do. So but I think my ultimate thesis about Bitcoin says that even those people are going to benefit from Bitcoin adoption, whether they ever get Bitcoin or not. And that's the sort of thing that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of you know bullishness for the future. Like kind of surprisingly so for someone who's been a lifelong pessimist, I guess.
Oh, that's interesting. You were a pessimist before Bitcoin?
Yeah, deeply pessimistic, and I attribute a lot of that to being that guy that's standing out there on his own since I was, 14 years old, going, "Hey, this whole money thing is a scam. These people are printing money. That they're bailing their buddies out, and this goes nowhere but bad." And when you don't have an outlet for that, when you say, "Well, the only way out of this is either to join the scammers that are just taking as much as they can as quickly as they can before the thing falls apart." Or you just relegate yourself to being a farm animal for the rest of your life, just being a resource that's getting continually squeezed until they can get every last ounce of resource out of you. That is a very hopeless existence, right? So when the moment that you have this thing where you go, "Oh, I don't have to like degrade myself that way. I don't have to be subjected to those forces. I can take some control of my forward destiny." Like you don't ever get to escape sovereignty, you don't ever get to escape all of it, but you can certainly insulate yourself from the more pernicious aspects of it, and get yourself into a place where you can go, hey, there is a possibility of a better future, and it's right around the corner, and it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. It doesn't have to be collapse and zombie apocalypse and World War III. It can just get better. Things can just get better. And that, like, I think Elon Musk talks about it, for humanity to thrive, there has to be hope. And if you don't have hope, then, it's sort of becomes a very bleak existence. Despite material comforts all around you, you can have the, neat things and, cars that fly and whatever it is. But if there's just no hope for the future, if you just go, this is just the grind I'm going to do, it becomes bleak. And so Bitcoin for me provided that avenue where I go, oh my God, there is a legitimate hope. It's not just like some fanciful thing or like I'm waiting for the alien Nibiru thing to come down and save the world. It's like there's actually a thing that we built that's there right now that works. That if we all sort of kind of embrace it and promote it and keep it alive and keep it decentralized and keep it permissionless and keep it secure, then there is a very clear path forward for everybody, not just Bitcoiners, not just early adopters, but everyone on planet Earth benefits from Bitcoin. It fundamentally changes the way power politics plays. It fundamentally changes the way the political economy shapes up. It changes finance. It changes everything. And I think those things, as they trickle through, they just make the world a better place. It makes it more pro human, more pro thriving, and less about extraction and more about flourishing. That's absolutely the thing that gave me a lot of hope for the future and very much changed me from a deeply pessimistic person and it's like a prepper and a person that was always storing up for, catastrophe to someone who just doesn't really worry about that stuff too much anymore. So it's a nice place to be. I love it.
Yeah, that is cool. And I agree. Bitcoin definitely gives hope. And you talk about a lot of these things in your book, The Great Realignment, which I loved.
Thank you.
And what it was the core thesis in your book?
Well, the core thesis, I think I upset a lot of apple carts in that book, and it follows a similar trajectory to most. And when people start talking about economic history and things like that, I think even some of the greats like Lynn Alden and even the Breedlove series and everything, I think they start their analysis just about 5,000 years too late. But from that core thesis, I think we all kind of end up at the same spot, which is where we are now. It's just I trace a slightly different line to get there. So the core thesis says that, I mean, if you trace it all the way through, that most people don't understand where power comes from, where money comes from, and all the little things and systems that are built on top of that, where these systems come from to begin with. But because Bitcoin is now a valuable asset that is a sovereign ownership type property. It's something that's never existed in the history of this game that we've been playing for the last 12,000 years. And so the thesis says that because of this change in the global rule set, it sort of changes how everyone must play the game. And what I say is what we've been doing since the advent or the dawn of agriculture is basically a game of competitive resource capture. Powerful people come in and capture and control resources. The more resources you can capture and control, the more power you have, the less work you have to do as a resource owner. But there's the complications of actually managing resources. And like a little meme I was kind of working on recently was to my mind the difference between like communism and capitalism as we think about them today is the difference between being like a factory farm chicken and being a free range chicken, but you're still a chicken. The farmer's still getting the meat and eggs. It doesn't matter, and it's the person that runs the farm or the people that are making the decisions that matter. So what Bitcoin does, to my mind, is it provides a rule set that can't be violated in a game that's been played with no rules. Because any way a powerful person can capture and control resources is a valid way to play that game because there is no arbiter of how you capture and control resources. And you can see it happen daily all around the world. You can see it throughout history. Like we've gone and just flattened cities, and people go, hey, that's against the rules. And I go, well, the city's still flat. Like it didn't change the outcome. It didn't change what these people did. The United States invaded Iraq under very false pretenses. Nothing happened except we we as resources got extracted from further. Iraq as resources got extracted from further. And despite all the condemnation and all this and that and the other thing, they go, well, it's just how the game gets played. Every means of capturing and controlling resources is a valid way to do it because there are no rules to the game, because there is nothing that can enforce a rule on a global game of competitive resource capture. But Bitcoin changes that because it is a rule that you can't violate. If you want to capture that resource, you can't force someone to take that resource from them. The only way you can do it is either by deceit or trade. And the most effective way for most, I think, is more and more people understand what it means to custody Bitcoin and how to protect their sovereignty in Bitcoin, then trade becomes the most logical way to do it. But if trade is the only way you can acquire the most valuable resource on earth, and if the game is to competitively capture resources, then it changes the way the competition plays out forever. Like, just like if you invented a rule in European soccer or American football or American baseball or basketball or hockey or anything, if you made a rule that can't be violated, it doesn't matter that every other rule could be. There is one rule that you can't break. It changes every one of those games forever. Like, it's going to fundamentally change the way everybody plays the game because all the strategies around rule violations and how you break rules and all that kind of stuff change. And Bitcoin provides that for the global political economy in a way that I think is profound and deeply underappreciated, even by the most bullish of bullish Bitcoin maxis. I don't think people have fully wrapped their heads around what that potentially does to the global political economy. So that's the long-winded short version of my thesis.
So that unbreakable rule is self-sovereignty?
Indeed. I mean, what Bitcoin does, like right now, when someone says, "Hey, I own real estate," right? You go, "Well, you own real estate at the whim of the sovereign." And the sovereign is the one that enforces your claim on that real estate, and the sovereign is the one that can revoke that claim on the real estate at any time with no recourse to you. And there are paper rules in place and paper promises that say, well, they have to do this, they have to do that. But at the end of the day, if the sovereign just comes in and goes, nope, it's mine now, they're taking it, period. And you have no ability to resist that sovereign force unless you are also a person that wields significant resources enough that you could repel sovereign invasion. But that's true of everything in our lives, from the clothes on our back to the food that we eat to, they just strip the entire world of their freedom of movement on a whim, like by executive fiat, and people just obeyed, for the most part. So they can strip these things from you at any time because in that game, like I said, there are no rules, right? But Bitcoin changes that because it is an egalitarian access, zero trust property. The way you gain access to it is you procure it and then you secure it. And once procured and secured, it cannot be taken from you by force. Your life can be taken, your real estate can be taken, your car can be taken, your bank account can be seized, all your fiat savings, everything, your ability to travel, all of it can be taken from you. But just like an idea, they can't take that Bitcoin. And that is a big deal, and it became a much bigger deal when the large financial players agreed that it's a resource worth capturing. The second they made that decision, or the second they embraced that decision, or the second they relented and adopted that decision, or however it goes, however you want to frame it, it changed everything forever. And there's no going back to the time before Bitcoin, right? Unless Bitcoin becomes centralized and co-opted, and it's not a foregone conclusion that can't happen. But I think just given the trajectory so far, and one of my big missions with Microseed and just my books in general and everything I try and say is self custody and run a node. I mean, those are the two most important things I think people can do to help ensure that this magical, incredible invention stays with us for the next 100 years. And I think if that holds true, then I think all those sort of bright visions of the future manifest much faster than people may realize right now.
Hey there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow the channel. Want to sleep easy? Microseed lets you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's discreet, precise, and easy to transport. Get yours below. For powerful self-custody with no backdoors, I recommend the Trezor wallet. For peace of mind with collaborative custody, the Bitcoin Advisor is a trusted team who can also help with inheritance planning. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. And check out these super cool Satoshoes with over 40 styles to choose from. Plus 10% off with my link below. Now, back to the show. I want to get to Microseed in a minute, but when you mentioned all the big players coming in, they are offering, most of them are suggesting that we buy ETFs or treasury held Bitcoin, which is a way some people start, but obviously then the next step is self custody.
Indeed. I like that it helps lead people towards, Bitcoin speculation at best, which is what that, buying an ETF or like holding your Bitcoin on Coinbase or something like that. That's you're essentially a speculator at that point. What I think happens though, like if my thesis holds true that we are playing a game of competitive resource capture, if you look at what these companies are doing, they are competitively capturing that resource voluntarily through trade. They are holding all the Bitcoin and they give a paper promise to somebody else. So, in terms of a way to capture the most valuable resource ever created by mankind, that seems to me like a pretty slick way to do it. And especially if they're one of these loan companies and things like that, like there's that idea of like, well, hey, you can keep your Bitcoin and you can have some fiat on top of it. Well, even if 10% of those people get liquidated, which I think would be a low number, I think a lot more people will get liquidated as they take out these 12% loans on these things. And especially in a big drawdown or something like that, like if you're levered 50% of your stack and then Bitcoin nukes, 60%, you go, "Oh, well, now you got to come up with a lot of money. And if you don't have that money laying around or if you haven't played your cards right, you lose all that Bitcoin." What that does, though, is it transfers the Bitcoin from your possession to someone else's possession who is going to be stacking up a lot of Bitcoin because that is the goal of a competitive resource capture economy is to capture and control as many resources as you can. So if you have no way to steal it from somebody, the next best way is to sort of bilk them out of it by telling them, hey, there's this shiny new thing. So for me, I look at it and I go, well, it's a great way to get people exposed to like price action and speculation. The next step for the people that really want to truly become sovereign, like in as close to that as you can achieve without wielding significant force, the ability to control property is a core tenet of all sovereignty, right? Whether you're a king or a president or a Congress or a dictator or whatever it is, your ability to exclude others from your property is a core component of that. And self custody in cold storage is a way to become truly sovereign by definition. You go, I can exclude others from this valuable property. And when people give that up willy nilly or make it so others can stack up lots and lots of Bitcoin like these ETFs and all that, those guys are amassing enormous amounts of control over enormous amounts of resources. And there's only a paper promise to redeem it. So I think people are playing a dangerous game in that regard. And they're also incentivizing these people to take on a lot of Bitcoin. By but the corollary to that is as people get more involved into Bitcoin in general, and you've probably seen this as well. Like if you go on Twitter and you look at like the plebs or whatever, the second people go like, I'm putting all my attention and focus on Bitcoin. I'm saving everything in Bitcoin. I try and do everything in Bitcoin. I'm trying to do all my transactions in Bitcoin. The second they adopt that, if you look at their timeline on their public timeline, all of a sudden they are losing weight. They're spending more time with family. They change all these little like micro decisions in their world. They stop focusing on like, well, I need a new car. I need to buy a Tesla. I need to get a stereo or whatever it is. And they start focusing on things that are actually truly important to human thriving: family, time, quality time, taking care of your health, eating better, all these sort of things. And so all these metrics across all these people that adopt Bitcoin improve dramatically and in a very short time. And my argument says, well, that's going to be true, just as true for you as it is for me, as it is for all the other plebs that have gone through this experience already and experienced how transformative Bitcoin can be just by changing that mindset. I say it's impossible that those same effects will not happen to other people that are adopting Bitcoin, whether it's Larry Fink at BlackRock or whether it's the guy that's running Fidelity or the gal that's running, whatever hedge fund or whatever. All of these people, as this trickles through to the large economic players, whether it's city government, county government, some local township, a small company, a big company, it changes the way they look at the world. It changes the way they approach their time preference. It changes their time horizons and it changes where they put their energy and their focus. And I think because of that, that's the thing I think that even if you don't hold Bitcoin 40 years from now, I think you're just going to look around the world and go, man, the world is just a better place. I don't know why I got better. I don't know why my money seems like it goes further. I don't know why the quality of my things is going up. I don't know why my quality of life went up. Thank goodness for the government or for President Ding Dong or, dictator Sam or whatever it is, wherever they put their thing, I will know. I go, but it's because Bitcoin is at the bottom of all of these decisions now. All of these decisions on these little micro levels How are we going to increase our production this year? How many people are we going to lay off? Are we going to give raises? Are we going to do all this? Bitcoin changes all those decisions in just little ways, and it just nudges them all towards human thriving. And when you have 100,000 of those decisions going one direction from people that are not economically powerful, it's just a neat thing to watch. When you have millions of those decisions happening by people that are very economically powerful, I think the transformation is going to be astonishing. I don't think people can really comprehend like how great the world can be when those decisions are aligned towards human thriving rather than human exploitation.
Yeah, sounds like a much better world.
I hope so.
So, what you're saying is, as more and more people and companies adopt Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin, that fixes incentives and in turn fixes many things in the world.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, you can already sort of see it happen. Like in all these companies that adopt a Bitcoin treasury and they go, okay, well, we're going to save in Bitcoin. All of a sudden, if you're the CEO of that company and you look around and you go, well, before we had to keep up with 12%, you know, base money inflation every year. And you say, well, how many things on earth can improve at 12% a year? You go, nothing. Like literally nothing. You can't get 12% thinner every year. You can't get 12% more muscular every year. You are going to hit practical limits on that. And when you hit those practical limits, things have to degrade. You can't, like, if you keep trying to lose 12% a year, sooner or later, things systems are going to start breaking down. And right now, these companies have been trying to keep up with this debasement rate that is nearly impossible to overcome. And most of them do it through fiat shenanigans, right? They do stock buybacks and they do all these things to prop up the value of their share price because that's the only thing that can keep them solvent. If they weren't doing that, then they're going bankrupt. Michael Saylor points this out very poignantly. He says, "Look, our company was dead in the water for 20 years. We had nothing and zero possibility of ever keeping up with these people that wield far more economic influence than they do." And he said, "Well, I could pack it in or I could go Bitcoin." The second he went on a Bitcoin standard, you go, "Oh, what happened to his company?" I mean, it just magically blossomed, right? And you say, well, it's magic, and you go, well, maybe, or maybe that's what Bitcoin's built to do. It's built to protect people from that sovereign debasement. And so, if you're Michael Saylor's company, he doesn't have to lay off a bunch of workers this year. He doesn't have to degrade the quality of his products this year. But the same thing's going to happen at Ford Motor Company or Toyota. They go, well, because right now, if you go look at the quality of a car, you go, cars are enormously expensive right now and they are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper in terms of the things that they pack the car full of. They give you a lot of trinkets and things that increase the perceived value of it, but at very little cost to them. And those things tend to break more often, right? So there are some car companies that do really well at preserving the sort of core reliability of the vehicle, but most car companies, like if you go look at BMW or Mercedes, those things are literally garbage cars now. Like they use cheap plastic components, they use things that wear out very quick because their whole business model is fill this thing full of like things that make people feel like they're in first class land, but it's all going to break in a year or two. And the rich people won't care because they're just going to buy another one anyway. And the poor people that are trying to keep up end up with these jalopies, but they get to walk around acting like they're one of the people that could afford the jalopy to begin with. But it doesn't improve the quality of life for anybody that's buying this thing. And it costs them enormous amounts of money. But the only reason they have to pay that much money is because Toyota is getting debased constantly. And so you have to strategize. If you're the CEO of Toyota, you go, how do we keep up with debasement? And I don't think that's at the forefront of their mind. They just go, well, our profit margins have to stay X. How do we keep profit margins X? You either degrade quality, reduce workforce, or you pack a full of trinkets and ding dongs that you can overcharge for, but it doesn't do anything to like how can we make this car more affordable and more reliable for the little guy, and then we'll just sell a lot more of them that way. They just can't have that conversation because it doesn't work with their bottom line. And I think Bitcoin on the treasury changes that it makes it so they go, oh wait, well, our bottom line is going up every year, so we don't have to cut workforce this year. We can actually give people raises this year, and which then improves the quality of the products that are going out. And then they can start looking at things like, well, hey, instead of packing this thing full of trinkets and ding dongs that nobody can afford anymore, how about we start making like nice, inexpensive, reliable vehicles for the everyday man to go out, like the Ford thing early on in the day, like every car in every driveway but make it reliable and functional and work. And it doesn't have to be a $30,000 car, it can be a $12,000 car or a $10,000 car. And then all of a sudden, everybody's life gets a little bit better because the people that were taking the bus can now take a car. So it has this like neat trickle up kind of effect because these companies aren't forced to degrade anymore. And that I think is why Bitcoin is one of those things that as all of these economic decisions happen throughout the economy, all of those things get impacted the same way. It happens at the city government. Hey, we don't have to cut services because our Bitcoin treasury grew. Hey, we don't have to cut the county services because Bitcoin treasury grew. Hey, we don't have to cut my small business. I don't have to get cheaper stuff from China. I can order US made stuff or however it works. All those little micro decisions add up to everybody getting better all across the world all at once, sort of almost auto magically.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so Bitcoin is a bearer asset, which is why we have to hold it in self custody. Do you have a recommendation of a wallet before we then go to Microseed, which is how we store our seed phrase on metal?
I'm a huge fan of the Cold Card wallet, and I have no affiliation with them. I just like Cold Card. I like what they do. Every wallet, every hardware wallet has something about it that is potentially, depending on like how paranoid you are about, being attacked by North Korea or something like that. But among them, among the commercially provided wallets, I think Cold Card wallet is right up there. We being Microseed, we're just at Bitcoin is for everyone. That's Unchained is for everyone. They were a big sponsor of the show there, but we were right next to the Seed Signer guys, and they have like that sort of open source project. I think they're also one of the really really great providers of like signers and things like that are fully open source, and you can sort of vet everything that's going into it. So there's a couple. I mean, if I was going to recommend one or the other, it'd probably be Cold Card or Seed Signer and what they're doing over there. They actually gave me one, so I'm very grateful to them for that. I get to tinker with that a little bit, but yeah, those are the 2. Blockstream Jade obviously makes a pretty good product. Like Bitbox, I actually like what Bitbox does, but they're USB connected, so there's some issues around that. But I think almost any of them is better than keeping a piece of paper in your safe or keeping it on Coinbase. People kind of crap on Trezors, but I go, well, I think ultimately it's probably better than non like custodial savings on Coinbase or Kraken or even River Swan. I mean, those are great companies. They're great Bitcoin companies, and I think it's probably better for most people if they really want to embrace their sovereign ownership of this very valuable property. They should probably take self custody of it and protect that as best they can.
Yeah, and I was speaking to Terence Michael, and he was saying so far, even Ledger or Trezor haven't been hacked. I know they're not air gapped, and one has a back door. But yeah, I suppose it depends on your level of expertise, what you're comfortable with. As I was telling you, I spoke to somebody who lost 7.4
Oh,
Bitcoin.
yeah.
It wasn't the wallet's fault. He downloaded a fake app from the App Store
Oh
and
God.
entered his seed phrase in. So that and those kind of things are why some people don't like cold storage. But for most of us, we need it for exactly this reason, that it is a bearer asset. And if you have it in an ETF or on Coinbase, there is that small chance one day that they could co opt it.
Yeah, I think it would be a trivial thing to do. And depending on how strongly the incentives are aligned towards capturing and controlling that resource, I think will very much change how people choose to either allow redemptions or not. And it also depends on how much sort of paper shenanigans they build on top of it and how fragile they make their infrastructure on top of Bitcoin and things like that. My hope is that Bitcoin itself provides the escape valve for them that they're less incentivized to do that. Just historically speaking, they tend to kind of go down that road anyway, and increase a lot of fragility, for short term gain and profit. So we'll kind of see how it plays out. But I think for the average person, it's kind of the equivalent of like owning and renting, right? Like I think it would be incontrovertible to say, hey, it's better to own your house than to rent something from someone, some rent seeker somewhere. And depending on how much it costs you and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like there's obviously arguments to be made against owning or renting or whatever. But I think all things held equal, you kind of go, well, if I own my house, it's probably better than not owning a house because that's at the end of the day, you at least have somewhere to go in the rain, right? Or you can get kicked out of your rental. And I think the same is true of Bitcoin. You go, all things held equal, which is better, owning the property that everybody on planet Earth is going to want, or letting someone else hold it for you because you're worried about making a mistake? Maybe, just maybe, it might be a good idea. You don't have to take custody of all of it either. I mean, just have enough or something that can't be taken from you is a big deal. And it's when people think about it, I think they think about it in the abstract because most people in the West haven't dealt with like asset seizure, right? Like, unless you're a drug dealer or a suspected drug dealer or something like that, or a terrorist or whatever, suspected terrorist, the likelihood of you getting your assets seized sort of willy nilly is pretty low, right? That doesn't mean it can't happen though. And it doesn't mean that it can't happen much sooner, or it couldn't become much more likely to happen to you. So, given those possibilities, and it all sort of varies on the political climate and what's happening and how many mistakes they make from here to there. Owning that valuable property can be the difference between life and death in the extremists, right? So, I think if, let's say, someone had like zero point 0.1 Bitcoin and that was their whole stack, then maybe take control of like 0.025 of that Bitcoin, just a quarter of it or half, and just know that no matter what, you have sovereign control over one single bearer instrument, and then keep that as simple as possible. I don't know the details of the guy that downloaded the app, but I was on a Spaces a couple months back, and there's a really bright guy came on. He's very tech forward, very tech, like a deep technical understanding of security, internet security and like operational security around Bitcoin, securing your Bitcoin. And people said, "Hey, what do you think people should do to secure their Bitcoin?" And he starts going down this rabbit hole of like, "Well, you need to set up like a remote desktop on this rented server and then use Tor to get into it. And then when you get to Tor, you need to tunnel over through a VPN to this other remote server. And that way you can do, you know, and you can just hear the smoke coming out of everyone's ears after the 30-second mark because this guy he didn't say anything wrong. He was 100% right. And if you were trying to protect yourself against like a Russian state adversary, yeah, those are the steps you want to take. But if you're just Joe average pleb who's sitting on like 0.7 Bitcoin or something like that, like I go, that's a pretty extreme path to go down, and it introduces a lot of external risks that you may not be aware of. And until you have that deep expertise in that realm, then you're sort of increasing your attack surface while you're decreasing some attack surfaces, right? But the funniest thing to me was at the end of it, he said, "Yeah, I created this new wallet once, and then I threw away the wrong seed phrase." I went, "Wait a minute. So you just went on this like 45-minute rant about all these amazing security practices that you did, and then somewhere in there you just botched throwing out the wrong seed words. You created a new wallet, you saved the old words, you threw out the new words, you transferred everything, and then you couldn't get your Bitcoin back." So I go, "Okay, so you just suffered a loss of your sovereign property and your sovereign property rights because you threw out the wrong piece of paper. But meanwhile, that that Bitcoin is very well secured from any nation state attack, and it's also secured from you now because you can't get it."
Well, you'd only lose it if you lost your wallet, right? Because if you lose your seed phrase, but you got the wallet, you're
Potentially.
okay.
I mean, if you lose access to that, he lost the Bitcoin. He couldn't get it because he tossed the seed words.
Okay, that's such a great example of
Yeah, thank you.
we make things complicated, and I love what you said about take some and put it in
Yeah.
self-custody instead of all, maybe.
Right. You necessarily don't have to take all, right? I mean, but especially if you're new to it, just go create an Electrum wallet, like learn a little bit about Tails, learn a little bit about Tor, learn what it takes to like download a Tails implementation and then boot to Tails. There's an Electrum wallet built right into that thing. Every single Tails implementation has an Electrum wallet built in. Create yourself an Electrum wallet, record the seed phrases, put 0.001 Bitcoin into it. Just see if you can create a wallet, open it, spend from it, check it, make a watch wallet, all those kind of things. And just tinker, with $50 for the Bitcoin. I mean, someone will come along and say, "You're bloating the UTXO set or something." And I go, "Yeah, but it's important to learn. And besides, those blocks, half of them are going out empty anyway. So who cares?" And right now is a great time to do it. You can get 1 or 2 sats for VByte on a transaction. You can see how that confirmation process works, and you can just get comfortable with navigating that space without dumping your whole stack in there because there is that risk, like you fat finger something and all of a sudden all Bitcoin gone and you go, "Oh, whoops, I probably shouldn't have done that." And I've heard things as dumb as someone said, "Hey, I heard I needed to take self custody," and someone said I needed a Bitcoin address. So I Googled Bitcoin address and I just picked the first one I found. And so I sent all my Bitcoin there. And you go, "Oh dear. Oh God." Like, and they go, "Hey, how come I can't see my Bitcoin? Because you just gave it to some random address without any expertise." So I would say don't take it willy nilly. It's not just like we'll just try and wing it. I would say there is some homework involved. It's not going to be right for everybody, but to find out if it's right for you or not, start tinkering with little tiny amounts from your Kraken account, or your Coinbase account, or wherever it is, and just send a little bit and see if you can navigate it. And if you can figure it out and you can reliably reproduce that path, then maybe take a little bit more. Have enough that that little legacy savings of yours will be protected in your custody at all times.
And then get yourself a microseed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go buy Microseed.
Yeah, well, because we need to keep them safe. Why did you invent that? How did you come up with that idea?
Well, it was a selfish invention. For those who aren't aware, the Microseed is a way to store your 12 or 24 word seed phrase on a single 1 inch washer, titanium or steel. The idea being is you want a robust format that won't burn, like if your house catches fire. You want something that won't get crushed or degrade with time, like a piece of paper with some ink on it. Like most people don't realize, unless you have archival paper, there's bleach in all white paper that is produced today, and that bleach degrades the wood pulp over time, which will make those words fade and et cetera, et cetera. Plus, if it gets wet, it can get destroyed. And so, if you can't recreate your seed phrase, you can't recreate your wallet, right? So, the best practice is when you get your stuff moved in to cold storage, like on a hardboard wallet or something like that, that you copy those seed words down onto something that can't easily be destroyed. And Microseed makes that in a very compact package. So, as someone in BTC Prague, a friend of mine, Zaza Wow Wow, he said, "Well, it's like a little bit more losable, but a lot more hideable." I said, "Yes, that's exactly right." And when I created the Microseed, I had a competitor's product, and it's the little titanium plate thing. And it took forever to bang this thing out. Like, the big problem I had, like, right out of the gate was I had it sitting on the table for, like, months, right? I just look at it and go, "Oh, I should really back up my seed brace. Oh, I'll do that later. I don't feel like, I'd make excuses not to use it or whatever." And, it's lazy security practices, but I think a lot of people kind of go through that. So I ended up, like, I tried hitting it on my kitchen table and it wasn't making impressions very well. So I ended up, like, sitting on the concrete floor with my girlfriend looking at me like I'm a lunatic and kind of going, like, "What are you doing? You look like a chimpanzee, like, cracking nuts. Like, what is this?" I'm like, "I gotta get my seed for," and I ended up, like, banging my finger, which, I'm a little frustrated by because I hadn't hit myself with a hammer since I was 7 years old, So I was just like, how is this happening to me right now? But when it was all said and done, I looked at it and I went, "Well, what if I want to make another wallet now? Like, do I have to go online and order this plate thing and do this all over again and spend an hour and a half, like, banging on the floor and maybe making a mistake? And what happens if I want to make 10 wallets? Or what if I lose this thing? Or what if this or what if that? And what if I want to take it on a plane? Am I going to put that in my checked luggage? Like, all my Bitcoin is now in my checked bag. I just hope they don't lose my bag or some TSA guy doesn't find it or who knows what." So I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, I wish I could just have it all, like, on one single washer. Like, because you see the stack of washers, like the DIY version, like Bolt and thing. Those aren't easy to create either, and you also end up with a stack of washers, right? Like, you're basically just walking around with a roll of quarters in your pocket, going, "Well, I hope no one looks at this or figures out what it is." So I thought, man, it would just be great if you could just put all the words on one washer and then you could just hide that thing anywhere. And if I wanted to take it on a plane, I can just throw it in the change jar with my coins and my keys, or I can just sew it into my clothing, or I could whatever. I mean, there's just unlimited ways you can hide a 1 inch washer. It gets harder if you're trying to hide 24 washers. It gets really hard if you're trying to hide a 3 inch by 3 inch plate and some of those other, like, cartridge things and all that. That's all heavy metal steel stuff that, like, TSA is probably going to want to look at. They might not, but they might. And that's the part I kind of go, well, I don't want to. The might is the part I'm kind of trying to avoid. So that's where Microseed was born. It was just entirely selfish design. It was an entirely selfish invention, and then it turned out to be just extraordinarily hard to pull off. So when I finally got it working and got it going, I had a bunch of friends that were going, "Hey, that's amazing, dude! I want one of those." I'm like, "Well, okay, let's see if I can maybe turn this into something that," because it looked like it was a helpful thing to other people, and if I can help people take self custody, then I feel like life is a win for me. I've done my part.
Yeah. So a Bitcoin-based business, and can people pay in Bitcoin?
Yes, you can absolutely pay with Bitcoin. We use Zaprite for everything, and Zaprite is also a Bitcoin company run by Bitcoiners, and they're very pure and true to the purpose. And they're just awesome, and I love them. And I will go through all kinds of hoops just to keep using Zaprite because I like those guys. I like the way they do stuff. So yeah, we take on chain, we take Lightning, and we also take dirty fiat if you have to.
And how much of your net worth in a percentage basis is in Bitcoin?
100%.
Love it.
Yeah,
Cool.
like
You're all
everything.
in, even though I've heard you say that Bitcoin you think might only have a 80% chance of making it.
I would rather I'm sort of ride or die, right? Because the alternative, like if Bitcoin dies, I kind of go, well, the rest of this is sort of meaningless to me. Like me trying to like scrape up some fiat gains and get myself a new Porsche next year or something like that. Like just seems like a very very hollow pursuit anymore. And so I go, well, if Bitcoin fails, I'm probably going to become Amish. Like I'm just going to go make my own butter and raise sheep and ride around on a horse because I just don't want to participate in this setup the way it is set up right now. Without Bitcoin, all of this looks very bleak to me. With Bitcoin, I go, this is a world worth fighting for. And I'll write it to zero if I have to. But yeah, but I'm all in. And that's Jeff Booth's voice in my head. And when I launched Bitcoin, or when I launched Bitcoin, I'm Satoshi. Surprise! No, when I launched
Breaking
Microseed,
news.
I had Jeff Booth's voice in my head, and it was on Robin Sayers' podcast. I heard him say, like, where are you putting your attention? Where are you putting your focus? Are you putting more energy and effort into maintaining the fiat beast, or are you putting your effort and energy into the thing that's going to make it better? And I thought, yeah, that's a great way to do it. And so I was working a fiat job at the time, and I was doing quite well. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna, and it at a high degree of stress and a little bit of like, this might not have been the best idea, but I'm gonna just do it anyway. And I can report just like every other Bitcoiner kind of goes all in. My life has gotten a lot better. I've probably lost 30 pounds. My health metrics have improved dramatically. I quit drinking and I quit this and I quit that. And like everything is just better, because I went on a Bitcoin standard and because I put all my attention and focus into Bitcoin and specifically getting people to take self custody and run a node. Like those two things are sort of my purpose right now. It's the purpose of Microseed more than anything else. Like if someone, I don't care how, if they buy my competitors' products, it's great. Just buy something, do something, take self custody, protect your seed phrase, and then run a node. Like figure those three things out. And it doesn't matter if you buy a Microseed to do it. It doesn't matter if you buy whatever, or if you figure out a DIY way to do it. Great. Just do something, but take those steps, please, because what Bitcoin does for the world is so much bigger than what we can ever talk about, right? Because it improves the lives of everybody over time to a way where I think the world will be a really, really beautiful place to be a human being and somewhere where we don't have things like poverty and starvation and suffering and war and all those things. I think Bitcoin realigns all the incentives in such a way that those things become less and less prevalent until they just disappear entirely because there's just no reason to do it. And I think that's a noble cause and a thing worth fighting for. And it's absolutely something that I will devote the rest of my time on Earth to seeing that outcome occur. So we'll see if Microseed helps me get there or not. But yeah, but that's where I'm at in terms of the Bitcoin journey now.
I see it happening. As Tony Robbins says, burn the boats. And I have a bit of fear of burning all the boats, but my life has gotten better, like you said, since I have focused on Bitcoin. And yeah, I got to live in the world I want to see. I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
Jeff. Interviewed him twice.
Oh, have you really?
Yeah,
How remarkable. Oh, what a
yeah.
great guy. Huh?
Oh, he's amazing. And
Yeah.
one thing you differ a little bit on, Jeff says that for Bitcoin to survive as a store of value, it must become a medium of exchange, which it is in many parts of the world because I interview people all over the world and Africa is very much using it. Even people here are using it, but I know you differ a little bit on that, right?
I dicker slightly. I mean, like if you go back to the purists, like to the anarchists, the cypherpunks and things like that back in the day, their core thesis, like I don't know if you've read Eric Voskuil, I highly recommend it. I think if you can still be a Bitcoiner after reading his book Crypto Economics, I think you're probably pretty pure in the Bitcoin movement, because he kind of craps on a lot of modern ideas around Bitcoin, and but the original intention of this was black market money, right? Like you can transact without the government interfering. And some of those qualities have been sort of erased through time. Like when Satoshi wrote the white paper, I don't think he envisioned ASICs and centralized corporate mining entities and this sort of crazy price of 112 or 15 or 18,000 fiat cuck bucks for per coin. Just what that would do, because when people talk about peer-to-peer cash, they go, well, that's a node, a mining node sending coins to another mining node, right? And those days are gone. Like that just we're not going back to the days of like everybody runs their own mining node and they, create their own coins through proof of work and then transact to each other through nodes. I mean, there's 20,000 reachable nodes, there's maybe 80,000 sort of hidden nodes or what have you. But there's like 8 million Bitcoin speculators. So you go, well, let's get that to about a million nodes and we can start talking about peer-to-peer transactions and whether or not that's actually happening or not and what value it brings. And so the black market money thesis, like the transactional medium of exchange, I go, well, it can be important to an extent. And when you start looking at transactions, you go, well, if I send you, $10 worth of Bitcoin, you go, well, hey, we're transacting in Bitcoin. But what does that do for the network in terms of network security and the security budget and yada, yada, yada? You go, nothing. I mean, it's a triviality, right? What happens when BlackRock needs to settle with Fidelity and they're transferring, a couple million billion dollars worth of Bitcoin? And what happens when settlement is the primary transaction source? You go, well, then suddenly those fees start spiking because people want their transactions to go through and they want them to settle quickly. And so I think as a transactional medium, I don't know about buying coffee with it, making it like the thing that's going to keep Bitcoin alive. Transacting with it in mass when you have these major players doing it, I think partially satisfies what Jeff Booth is talking about. I just don't know. I don't think anyone can say with certainty what that looks like. And with all respect and love for Jeff Booth and much gratitude, I go, maybe, right? Like as far as I would take that. I think it's great when people transact in Bitcoin. I think it's great when people save in Bitcoin. Like Isabella, she's talking about like, she buys like preloaded credit cards and uses that to transact in fiat that's based on Bitcoin. So these are all great things. And I wouldn't discourage anybody from using it. I would also say, from my particular thesis and my particular standpoint, its role as sovereign property, I think, is sort of unparalleled in the way that it affects the global political economy. And whether that puts me at odds with a monetary purist or whatever, I go, I don't know. I mean, the monetary purism, I go, well, define money for me in a coherent way that is actually defensible, and I'll go, great, I'm all for it. But I haven't seen that yet, including the definitions I provided in my book. I think that's very much an open ended question about what money truly is and what it looks like and how it should look and why. Yeah, I mean, but if there's any dickering there, it's on the margins and in a very very gray portion of it. Writ large, I say, yeah, hell yeah, transact, buy stuff with Bitcoin, send Bitcoin to other Bitcoiners, use Bitcoin to help Bitcoin businesses, get those circular economies going. Make sure you're transacting as often as you can while you can. Consolidate your UTXOs, do all those things. They're all great. It's all wonderful. It's all good for Bitcoin. But to me, I go, fire up a node, have a node running and understand what it means to upgrade the software or not. Understand what it means to run a Bitcoin implementation or not. Whether you choose like Knots, great, awesome, love it. I love that there's competition to Core. If you choose Core, great, love it, go nuts. If you agree or disagree with the filtering theses and all these changes and whatnot, I think those are much more esoteric conversations than people give him credit for. But Eric Voskuil has also been working on LibBitcoin for a decade now, and it's an entirely different implementation. Like, Knots is core with filters if you wanted to be sort of basic about it. But I mean, it's more extensive than that. But LibBitcoin is its own unique thing. And I think it's going to change what that Bitcoin software landscape looks like. And last time I heard from him on Twitter or whatever, it's not like I'm friends with him or anything, but he says he's pretty close to getting this thing to work, and I think it's going to be a pretty lean implementation. So the more the merrier, I think. Like, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Please, for the love of Bitcoin, run a node. Like even if you want to keep your coins on Coinbase and just be like that guy or gal, please run a node. Like my goal in the short term is to get to 100,000 reachable nodes. My goal in the long term is a million reachable nodes. And I don't know how I'm going to encourage people to do that other than just saying this, like, please God, run a node. It's not that hard to do anymore. And take the time to learn, because that makes you part of the network rather than an observer.
Yeah, absolutely. Run a node strengthens the network, and the more we have, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
So, for our last question, Daniel, you mentioned a little bit about how Bitcoin has changed you, but I wanted you to comment, has it changed you spiritually in any way?
In a spiritual sense, I think it reinforces that sense of wonderment and awe. And when I talk about competitive resource capture economies, and when I talk about all those sort of things, I say there are four levers that you can pull on every human being to encourage them to be a resource for you. That is the sense of community. Every human being needs a sense of community larger than their familial group. Every human being needs a sense of sociability. Every human being needs a sense of individuality, and every human being requires some level of spirituality, some sense of wonderment and awe. And so if you look at those levers as ways to corral resources and to get people to become a resource under your umbrella, community is communism, sociability is socialism, individuality is capitalism, and then spirituality is religion, right? And those have been primarily for the last 12,000 years the levers people pull in varying degrees to organize people under a banner of whatever ism they happen to be flying at that time. But in terms of spirituality, if you look at it, you go, well, I wouldn't say like I'm some sort of born again Christian or something like that. And yet there is that sense of like, I think it's important for all human beings to have some sort of sense of humility in the face of the unknown. And I think things like Christianity are great vehicles for focusing that attention and focusing on, gratefulness and gratitude. And if you embrace it fully, like I would never be a person, I can say with absolute clarity, I would never be a person that's like a biblical literalist, where I go, Moses wrote the Bible and God was created the world in 6 days, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet there are teachings and lessons to be learned in there that I think are extraordinarily valuable. To the degree that someone embraces their spirituality, I think is a very personal journey. And I don't think it's right for anyone to judge anyone else's journey or their relationship with God or the universe or however they want to frame it, because they are in no better position to judge that relationship. The only person that can judge that relationship is God, right? So, but in terms of what Bitcoin has done for me, in addition to the hope, it also gives me a sense of gratitude, reminded me to always and continually try and be humble. Like I fail that miserably daily, right? Like, and I pray that I'll overcome those shortcomings of mine every day. I also look at it and go, at least I'm thinking about it, right? And I can absolutely attribute that to my Bitcoin experience, because prior to that, like I said, I was very pessimistic. I was very prepper. I was very like doom and gloom, and I was very like, oh, the end is coming, and we got to prepare for the zombie apocalypse or World War III or the collapse of the economy, blah, 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 And a lot of those things went out the window with Bitcoin and with my sort of thoughts on Bitcoin and where I think it's going, and whether I prove whether my thesis is proven correct or not is 10 years from now we'll find out. Maybe we can come back and talk again. I can say, "Wow, I was way off on that," or maybe I can say, "Look around, man! Like things are getting better. Things are better." And whether it's because my thesis is playing out or because other forces came into play, who knows? But I think that's the trajectory, and Bitcoin has certainly helped with both, with that humility, with that grace, with that gratitude, and with that appreciation for the wonder of God's world, and what blessings we all have, in this sort of amazing godly paradise, if you want to frame it that way.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Tell me where people can find you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Daniel21E15. It's also my Noster handle. Noster I kind of equate to like writing letters these days. Like once a week, I go and I've got a message. And you can find Microseed at Microseed21E15 or at 21E15 Microseed, something like that. One of those two. But you can check out the Microseed at microseed.io. And if you want to get a copy of my book, you can read that on Noster for free. I'm not here to shill books. But if you really want a paperback, you can order it on Amazon or you can order it through our website, microseed.io. But yeah, that's I think all my socials. No Insta or anything like that. I'm too old.
And I'll put links below. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Daniel.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I really appreciate being here. And it's a great show. I love what you're doing, Paula. Thank you so much.
Thank you.